After the applause of the graduation ceremony fades, Adrian Cole's world stops. There, among the crowd, stands Benetta's long-lost Lavand, a little girl whose smile is unmistakably his own. Harper. In that instant, past regrets collide with present responsibilities, and Adrian realizes that saving the inn may be the first step to saving the family he never knew he had. Before we dive into this, hit the subscribe button and tell us from where in the world you're watching from. The ceremony should have been over for him the moment the last speech ended. Adrian Cole had already mapped out his next 3 hours. Straight to the airport, first-class check-in, a quiet scotch before boarding, another handshake event, another name in the ledger of connections. That was all this graduation was meant to be. But halfway down the steps of the university auditorium, he stopped. The Charleston sun spilled gold across the courtyard, catching in the branches of the old oak trees. Families clustered for photos, graduates in black gowns throwing caps into the air, shouts of pride and laughter breaking against the salt-heavy breeze from the harbor. And there, by the archway leading to the parking lot, stood Bennett. For 20 years, her name had been one he avoided saying out loud. It wasn't shame. It was the knowledge that some doors once shut stay locked for good. She looked different now, steadier, composed, but with the same unshakable stillness that used to draw him in. And then he saw the young woman beside her, the black gown, the tassel swinging in the wind, the diploma clutched against her chest. None of that caught him. It was the smile, a half curve on the left, a sharper lift on the right. His smile. The noise around him thinned. His gaze fixed on the girl as she reached up to adjust the tassel on her cap. A glint of silver caught the light, a bracelet narrow and worn from years of use. He knew it without thinking. 20 years ago, he'd given that bracelet to Isla, engraved with coordinates only the two of them understood. The BMW keys were in his hand, his thumb resting on the unlock button. He didn't press it. He had an entire flight to New York waiting. Investors, contracts, deadlines. Yet the space between him and that bracelet, that smile felt heavier than all of it. Some moments in life don't ask for permission to happen. Just arrive uninvited and refuse to move aside. Adrian stepped off the path to the parking lot. The late afternoon heat clung to the air as Adrian stepped off the curb toward the parking lot. His mind should have been on the flight back to New York on the contracts waiting on his desk, but it wasn't. It was on the girl. She had already disappeared into the moving crowd. But the image of her face, his face 20 years younger, wouldn't leave him. The smile wasn't just similar, it was exact. He slowed his pace, weaving between families, taking graduation photos until the hem of her gown flashed again in his peripheral vision. She was walking beside Ella, their heads tilted close, as if sharing something meant for no one else. Ella's hand rested protectively on the girl's shoulder. Adrian's steps faltered. 2 decades since the last time he'd seen Ella, and she looked almost unchanged except for the faint edge in her posture, like a door she had once left open, was now bolted shut. He called her name. She turned, and for the briefest second, her eyes widened. Not in surprise, in warning. Adrian, her voice was level. Careful, you should go. Don't ruin this day for her. The girl Harper glanced over at him, polite but distant, her expression unreadable. Then, with a small nod, she walked on toward the lot. The sunlight caught the bracelet on her wrist, and there it was. The dent in the silver band where he had dropped it on Issa's dorm floor all those years ago. Adrian's pulse kicked. Took a step forward, but Issa moved into his path. Not today, she said. Softer now, but no less firm. Please. For a moment, the only sound between them was the thud of car doors closing and the distant cry of a gull. Isla, he managed. That bracelet. It's hers now, she interrupted, her gaze holding his for a beat too long before she turned away. Adrian stood rooted as they reached a white sedan. Harper slid into the passenger seat. Ella got behind the wheel. The engine started, and in seconds they were gone. The taillight swallowed by the street, remained there long after the lot began to empty, the heat shimmering off the asphalt. Whatever this was, it had just cracked open a door he didn't even know was still there. And now, There was no chance he was walking away. The Charleston Marina was quiet by evening, the mass of docked sailboats swaying against a burnt orange sky. Adrian sat in his rental car, the air conditioning humming faintly, his phone balanced in his hand. His thumb hovered over a name he hadn't called in years. Graham Lell, college roommate, local real estate broker, and one of the few people who had known both him and Ella before everything fell apart. He pressed the call button. Adrian Cole Graham's voice came through, warm but laced with curiosity. "Didn't expect to hear from you unless you were buying half the coastline. I'm in town," Adrian said. "Need a favor?" A pause, then a low whistle. "This about a property or a person?" Adrian leaned back, watching gulls dip into the water. "A graduate today. Name's Harper Bennett." The line went quiet for a beat too long. "She's not on the market," Graham said finally, his tone half joking, half warning. "I'm not looking to hire." "Her?" Adrian replied, sharper than intended. "Just need to know more. You saw her, didn't you?" Graham's voice softened. "You saw Isla." Adrian didn't answer. Graham sighed. "Harper's sharp, top of her class in hospitality management. Won an award for her senior project, a full restoration plan for Seb's Inn. That's the old boarding house out by the North Shore." Adrian straightened. Seb's Inn name pulled at a memory. Sketches on napkins. Late nights in Ella's dorm room. A dream they once shared to turn that weathered building into a boutique inn. "She's already pitched the idea to a preservation group," Graham went on. "Thing is, the property is about to change hands. Big developer wants to flatten it." Resort. Adrian's jaw tightened. He knew exactly which developer. Himself. The hum of the air conditioning suddenly felt too loud. "Where can I find her?" Adrian asked. Graham hesitated. "She's giving a talk tomorrow at the Maritime Hall Tourism Symposium public event." Peralt, belopped, bitword, bretaparent, iowindoward, tamundalated, red hour, rest, terrellum, amrita, top tan rock, winsome word, Adrian ended the call without answering. He did know why. At least he thought he did. But as the sun dipped lower over the harbor, he wasn't so sure if it was business guilt, something far more personal pulling him toward her. Morning sunlight spilled across the brick-paved streets of Charleston's historic district, catching on the wrought iron balconies and blooming window boxes. Adrian's black sedan rolled to a stop in front of the Maritime Hall, a restored 19th century building that now hosted conferences and exhibitions. Inside, the air was cool and tinged with the scent of polished wood. Rows of chairs faced a small stage framed by tall windows beyond which the harbor glimmered. People were filtering in, local business owners, preservation advocates, tourism officials. Adrian took a seat toward the back, his suit jacket draped neatly over the chair beside him. He kept his gaze forward, but his pulse quickened when Harper appeared at the side of the stage. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, posture steady. She didn't scan the room. Her focus was on the papers in her hand. The moderator introduced her. Harper Bennett, top graduate of the Coastal Hospitality Program, is presenting her award-winning proposal for the restoration of Seb's Inn. She stepped to the podium. Her voice was clear, confident, not rehearsed to perfection, but grounded in belief. "The Seb's Inn has stood on the North Shore for over a century," she began. "It's weathered storms, wars, and neglect. What it needs now isn't demolition, it's a second chance. This is more than a building. It's a living chapter of our Coastal Heritage. Adrian leaned forward slightly. The images projected on the screen showed peeling paint, warped floorboards, and underneath the same graceful lines he remembered from Issa's sketches in their college days. Then came a slide that made his chest tighten. Hand-drawn layout of the main lobby, complete with the curved reception desk, the reading nook by the east window, and the mosaic tile design on the floor. Every detail identical to the plans he and Ella had once scribbled together, down to the arched doorway framed with sea glass. Harper went on, unaware of the storm behind his eyes. Preservation isn't just about saving walls, it's about keeping promises to the past and to the future guests who will walk through these doors. The room broke into polite applause. As people began to stand, Adrian stayed seated, watching Harper gather her notes. He could walk away now, let the past stay buried. But when she turned to leave the stage, sunlight hit her face just so, and the echo of that familiar smile pulled him to his feet. He moved toward the side exit where she'd soon pass. The side corridor of Maritime Hall was narrow, lined with framed photographs of the harbor through the decades. Sailboats from the 1920s, shrimp tours in the 50s, and hurricane damage in the 80s. Harper emerged from the stage door, balancing her portfolio and a paper cup of water. She moved with the quiet purpose of someone used to packing up without. Lingering, Adrian stepped forward, voice steady but low.
Harper!
She stopped, brow furrowing slightly as if flipping through mental files to place him. Yes, I'm Adrian Cole. He left the title and reputation unsaid. They didn't matter here. I heard your presentation. It was impressive. Her posture stayed polite, but her grip on the portfolio tightened. Thank you. That means a lot. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to talk about Seabasin and about the plans you used. Something flickered in her eyes. Curiosity, maybe suspicion. The plans are my own work. I know, Adrian said, his tone careful, but some of those details, they come from designs I drew. 20 years ago with your mother? Her expression shifted barely, the kind of controlled change that suggested she'd learned. To keep walls up, you knew my mother in college. It wasn't a question. Yes, we were close. She adjusted the strap of her bag, looking past him, toward the glass doors leading outside. Then you also know she's not a fan of talking about the past. I'm not here to cause trouble, Adrian said. I just think we might want the same thing. For Sebs. She hesitated, then stepped aside as two conference volunteers rolled a cart past. Mr. Cole, I appreciate your interest, but this project isn't for sale. Not to you, not to anyone who sees it as a business opportunity first. I don't, Adrian replied more sharply than intended. Not anymore. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if weighing that last sentence. I have to go, she said finally. Good. Luck with your ventures. She walked away, the echo of her heels fading into the open lobby. Adrian stood there a moment longer, his reflection caught in a photograph of the harbor at dawn, water calm/sails full. He had the distinct feeling this was only the first round. Charleston's historic district was quieter at night. The tourists had retreated to their hotels, and the scent of salt water drifted through the narrow streets. Mingling with the faint sweetness of blooming magnolia, he sat for a moment, hands on the wheel, before stepping out. The wooden steps creaked under his weight, and before he could knock, the door opened. Ela stood there, hair pulled back, wearing a simple linen shirt and jeans. Her eyes, however, carried the same unflinching directness as years ago. I heard you went to Harper's presentation, she said. I did, Adrian replied. And I spoke too. Briefly, her jaw tightened. I told you not to disrupt her day. I wasn't trying to. He stopped searching for the right words. Ella. She used our design, the one from the old notebook. It's the window alcove, the beamwork, everything. Ella stepped aside, motioning for him to enter. The living room was warm but uncluttered, shelves lined with books on architecture and travel. She found the sketches in a box of my things years ago, Ella said. I told her they were from someone I used to know. She wanted to use them because they felt personal. I didn't stop her. Adrian's gaze shifted to a framed photograph on the mantel. Harper at age 10, sitting on the porch steps, a stray cat curled in her lap. "I should have been here," he said quietly. "That's not how life works, Adrian." Issa's voice was calm, but carried a steel edge. "You made your choices. You chased your first big deal, instead of coming with me. I raised her without you, and she's fine." "She's more than fine," Adrian said. Determined. But she looked at me today like I was just another investor trying to take something from her. Ella crossed her arms. "That's because in her world you are. If you want to change that, you'll have to prove otherwise. That means not buying your way in." He nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling on him. "I'd if I told you I want. To help her keep Sebzin alive, not as a business trophy, but as it's meant to be." Issa's expression softened just a fraction. "Then you better be ready to lose money, lose face, and answer questions you've avoided for 20 years. Adrienne met her eyes. "I am." For the first time that evening, Ella looked uncertain. She glanced toward the staircase where a faint light spilled from under Harper's bedroom door. "She doesn't know the full truth, Adrian. If this comes out, it has to be on her terms." "I understand," he said. Outside, a distant ship horn echoed across the harbor. For Adrian, it sounded less like departure and more like the start of a long overdue arrival. The next morning, the sun broke over Charleston Harbor, casting a pale gold light across the water. Adrian sat at a small cafe near the pier, nursing a coffee he hadn't touched. His phone buzzed. A message from Graham. Graham, Corpus. "Meeting with the Heritage Council this afternoon. If you want to help without getting in her way, that's your chance." Adrian typed back quickly. "Where?" By midday, he found himself outside the old brick building that housed the Heritage Preservation Council. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and sea salt, and the walls were lined with faded photographs of Charleston's past. Through the glass of the meeting room, Adrian saw Harper at the head of the table. Her presentation slides showing weathered wood beams, salt-worn balconies, and handwritten notes about preservation techniques. She spoke with conviction, fielding questions from skeptical council members. When one older man questioned the feasibility of her plan, Adrian caught the flicker of frustration in Harper's eyes. Without thinking, he stepped inside. "Apologies for the interruption," he said, keeping his tone measured. "I'm Adrian Cole. I have experience with historical property restorations and can vouch for the viability of this project." The room went quiet. Harper turned her gaze sharp. "I didn't ask for your endorsement," she said. "I know," Adrian replied. "But they needed to hear from someone who's put millions into preservation before and seen it work." The council chair cleared her throat. "Mr. Cole, if you have relevant experience, we'll hear it." Adrian spoke briefly but clearly, outlining methods that balanced profitability with preservation. Citing examples from his past work, he kept the focus on the inn, not on himself. When the meeting ended, Harper walked past him without a word. Until they reached the hallway, "You think this makes up for whatever history you have with my mother?" she asked, voice low but steady. "No," Adrian said. "This isn't about making up for the past. It's about making sure you don't lose something worth keeping." For a moment, Harper seemed ready to fire back, but instead she glanced toward the harbor through the window, then walked away. Adrian watched her go, realizing that the tide was shifting slowly, but enough to suggest that somewhere beneath the surface, she might be listening. Outside, the gulls wheeled overhead, and the wind carried the scent of the sea. The fight for Sebzin had only just begun. Late that afternoon, as the tide swelled against the harbor walls, Adrian was walking back to his car when Graham called. "Have you seen the Gazette?" Graham's voice was clipped. "Page 1. Sebzin's title is being challenged. Some developer claims the paperwork was mishandled 20 years ago. If they win, Harper's plan is dead before it starts." Adrian stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, the noise of the street fading into the background. "Who's behind it?" called her. "Properties," Graham said. "They're ruthless. If they smell blood, they'll take the whole block." Within the hour, Adrian was at the Sebz Inn. The building stood weathered but dignified, its faded teal shutters rattling in the wind. Harper was there, standing on the porch with a stack of papers clutched to her chest. "They're trying to bury us in legal fees," she said, without preamble. I don't have the resources to fight them. You're not fighting alone, Adrian replied. Harper's eyes narrowed. Why? Because you suddenly care about a building. Because I know what it's like to watch something you love get torn down while you stand there doing nothing, he said. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Harper handed him a document. If you're serious, start here. Find the original deed. The council says it's somewhere in the county archives, but no one's been able to locate it. The next day, they were in the Charleston County Records office. The scent of old paper thick in the air. Rows of wooden cabinets lined the room. Drawers labeled with years that spanned centuries. Ours passed in silence, except for the scrape of files and the occasional thump of a heavy ledger. At one point, Harper slid a folder toward Adrian. I found the purchase record from 1893. Not the deed, but it proves the property has been in continuous use. Adrian scanned the page, then looked up at her. This is something, and sometimes something is enough to turn the tide. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the tang of salt and a hint of an approaching storm. The fight was no longer just about preservation. It was about proving that some things once built deserved to stand. And for the first time, Harper didn't walk away from him. She walked beside him. By late afternoon, the air along the harbor had turned heavy, the sky pressing low with storm clouds. The first drops of rain tapped against the Sebzins' porch railing as Adrian and Harper returned from the archives. She stood near the dining table, a pot of coffee untouched. Beside her, I heard about Calder's claim, she said, her voice tight, and the storm warning. You shouldn't be out tonight. We found records that might help, Harper replied, slipping off her damp jacket. It's not the deed, but it's proof the inn's been active since the 1890s. Issa glanced at Adrian. And what are you planning to do with that? File an injunction? Said Bias Time. If Calder thinks this place is undefended, they'll bulldoze it before the council can vote. Lightning flashed through the front windows, illuminating the worn floorboards and faded wallpaper. The storm was moving fast. As they spoke, Graham burst through the door, shaking rain from his coat. Bad news. Calder's team is here.
Oh.
Trucks. Surveyors. The works they're set up down the road.
Wait.
Harper's jaw tightened. They're going to start before the storm hits, so they can claim the building was already unstable. Adrian grabbed his keys. Then we don't give them the chance. Headlights from Cedar's trucks cut through the rain, casting harsh shadows across the grass. Men in hard hats were unloading equipment, shouting over the wind. Adrian stepped out first, rain soaking his suit in seconds. You're trespassing, he called out. A foreman smirked. Paperwork says otherwise. Harper moved beside Adrian, her voice steady despite the wind. Not until a judge says so. You won't get that before the storm clears. For a tense moment, the only sound was the rain on metal. Then, reluctantly, the crew began packing up, muttering under their breath. The trucks pulled away one by one, taillights vanishing into the downpour. Back inside the inn, water dripped from their hair onto the floorboards. Harper looked at Adrian, really looked at him for the first time since they met. He didn't have to do that. Yes, he said quietly.
I did.
Outside the storm raged on, but inside the Sebs Inn, for the first time in years, the walls felt like they were holding. The storm deepened as night fell, the wind clawing at the inn's wooden shutters. Inside, the air smelled of wet timber and salt. The three of them, Adrian, Harper, Issa, sat at the long dining table under the dim glow of a single lamp. Documents spread between coffee cups. Graham returned with news. Calder's crew won't try again tonight, but they'll be back at first light. They're betting we won't be ready. Adrian leaned forward, tapping the old floor plan with his finger. We don't just defend, we make our case undeniable. If we can find the original operating license or a tax record before 1900, they have nothing. Harper pulled a file toward her, her hands quick but precise. It might be logged there. For the first time, they were working in rhythm. Ella watched quietly from the kitchen doorway, arms folded. The storm outside masked her voice when she finally said, You two even argue the same way? Harper froze for a moment, then went back to the papers. By midnight the wind had eased, but the rain kept falling. Adrian stood to stretch when he noticed light flickering across the road, headlights moving slowly, too slow for passing traffic. He walked to the window. They're back. Within minutes, everyone was on the porch, the rain plastering their clothes to their skin. A single pickup idled at the property line. A man stepped out holding a weatherproof case. "Message from Calder," he said, placing it on the porch railing. "You've got 24 hours to vacate." Harper took the case, opened it, and found photographs, close-ups of the inn's foundation. Cracks in the beams, water damage under the eaves. A typed note read, "Unsafe for occupancy. Demolition imminent." Adrian looked at Harper. "You're setting up a safety violation claim. If the council buys this, the vote's over before it starts." Harper's voice was steady, but her eyes burned. "Then we don't give them the chance." She turned to Adrian, the rain running down her face like lions carved in glass. "We finished the search tonight." They went back inside, shutting out the storm and the threat on the porch. Somewhere between the stacks of brittle ledgers and salt-stained photographs, the night would decide if the Siebes Inn survived another. By 4 in the morning, the storm had dwindled to a whisper, the inn's wooden frame creaking in the damp silence. The dining table was a battlefield of ledgers, maps, and coffee-stained notes. Adrian's eyes burned from scanning fragile pages. But he didn't stop. Harper was at the far end, sleeves rolled to her elbows, the clink of porcelain grounding the room. Then Harper's voice cut through. "Wait, look at this. Paid maritime lodging tax? May 3rd, 1898. The signature beneath belonged to Charleston's first harbor master." Adrian's pulse kicked. "That predates Calder's claim by 22 years. This is the key." Graham, half asleep on the couch, bolted upright. "If we get that certified by the records office this morning, they can't use the safety violation to fast-track. Demolition." Harper carefully slid the ledger into a waterproof case. "Then we're there when the doors open." By sunrise, they were on the courthouse steps, the first in line. The marble facade glistened under the weak morning light. Inside, the clerk took one look at the ledger and called for the county archivist. Within minutes, the archivist confirmed. The record was authentic, irreplaceable, and binding in any property dispute. Adrian exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and disbelief. Harper met his eyes, no longer with suspicion, but with something steadier. "One step closer," she said. As they stepped outside, the street was already stirring. Calder's black SUV was parked across the road. The man himself leaned against the door, arms folded, a thin smile on his face. "Congratulations," Calder said, voice smooth as the morning air. "You've bought yourself time, but you and I both know time runs out." Harper didn't flinch. "Then I guess we'd better make every second count." Adrian watched her walk ahead toward the inn. The case clutched tight. For the first time, he realized Harper wasn't just defending a building. She was defending the life she'd built without him, and maybe, just maybe, allowing him a chance to be part of it. The final battle for Siebes Inn had begun. The morning after their courthouse victory, Siebes Inn smelled of salt, wood polish, and fresh brewed coffee. Harper sat by the front window, ledger case beside her, while Adrian took a call from Graham in the hallway. "He's making a move," Graham said. "Calder's filing an emergency petition to declare the building unsafe. It could bypass the property dispute entirely." Adrian rubbed his jaw. "On what grounds? Structural integrity report? I guess he paid someone to make it look bad." When Adrian returned to the dining room, Harper was staring out at the pier, her hands curled around a mug. "He's not stopping, is he?" "No," Adrian said, "but we can fight it. If we bring in an independent inspector, someone respected." Calder's report won't hold. Before Harper could answer, a knock echoed through the room. Issa opened the door to find Victor Calder himself in a tailored navy suit, holding an envelope. "I'm not here to argue," Calder said smoothly. "I'm here to settle." Placed the envelope on the table. Inside was a check. 7 figures, enough to secure Harper's future twice over. "You take this, and no one gets hurt." The room was silent, but for the faint ticking of the wall clock, Harper's gaze dropped. To the check, then lifted to Adrian. Her voice was steady. Harper's answer came without hesitation. "No, it's a promise." Calder's expression hardened, but he nodded once. "Then you'd better be ready for what comes next." When the door closed, Isla turned to Adrian. "He's going to push harder now." Adrian met Harper's eyes. For the first time, he saw not just his daughter, but a partner in this fight. Then we pushed back harder. Outside, gulls wheeled over the pier. Tide was coming in fast, and so was the storm Calder had promised. The wind off the harbor carried the scent of brine and rain as the three of them sat around the long oak table in Siebzen's dining room. "We need to get ahead of him," Harper said, leaning forward. "If he's trying to declare the building unsafe, we can't just wait for his next move." Adrian nodded. "Graham's already contacting a structural engineer out of Savannah. It's one with a reputation Calder can't smear." Issa, arms folded, glanced between them. "You'll need more than an engineer's report. He has influence in City Hall. If he pushes the safety board, they could shut us down before we get a chance to present anything." Adrian's mind worked through the possibilities. Then we bring the fight public. The community has a stake in this place. Memories, weddings, anniversaries. If we make enough noise, the council will have to listen. Later that afternoon, Harper and Adrian walked the narrow streets of the historic district, stopping into bakeries, art galleries, and small cafes. Harper spoke with the warmth of someone who believed in more than just bricks and mortar. Adrian watched her win people over, not with force, but with the same conviction that once made him dream alongside Ella. By the time they returned to the inn, a summer storm was pressing in from the coast, sky bruised with heavy clouds. The phone rang. Issa picked up, listened for a moment, then covered the receiver. "It's Graham," she said. "The engineer's on board, but Calder just filed for an emergency inspection tomorrow morning." Harper's jaw set. "And tomorrow, we're ready." For him, that night, Adrian stood alone on the balcony, the inn's lights glowing behind him. He could hear Harper laughing with Ella in the kitchen. The sound was new in this place, and it filled the air like something worth protecting at any cost. Down on the pier, a black sedan idled for a moment before slipping away into the rain. Adrian knew without seeing the license plate. Calder was watching. The line had been drawn, and neither side would step back now. The rain had stopped by dawn, leaving the streets slick and silver under the pale light. Adrian stood on the front steps of Siebzen, jacket buttoned, watching the white city truck roll up. Two inspectors climbed out, clipboards in hand, hard hats tucked under their arms, and behind them a black SUV eased to the curb. Calder stepped out, immaculate as always, carrying an umbrella, though the sky was clear. Harper appeared beside Adrian, her posture straight, voice even. "We knew he'd come." "Let him," Adrian replied. "We've got nothing to hide." Inside, Issa and Graham were ready. The structural engineer, a wiry man named Henry Cross, was already reviewing the beams and foundation, notes clipped neatly to his folder. The inspectors moved through the inn slowly, jotting observations, tapping at walls, measuring angles. Calder followed at a distance, making quiet remarks to one of them, too low for Adrian to catch. Harper stayed close enough to hear, her jaw tightening. At the grand staircase, one inspector frowned at a hairline crack in the plaster. Cater's lips curved slightly. "See, age takes its toll. Safety should be our priority." Henry stepped in smoothly. "That's superficial. The load-bearing structure is intact. Better than most buildings of this age, I can show you the original joinery. If you like." By mid-morning, the inspection was over. The lead inspector closed his notebook. "We'll file a report by the end of the week." Calder gave a polite nod, but his eyes lingered on Harper a beat too long before he turned away. When the SUV pulled out, Graham exhaled. "He's not done." That was just the opening move. Harper looked toward the shoreline where gulls wheeled above the pier. "Then we make our next move louder." That afternoon, flyers went up in shop windows across Charleston. Black and white photos of Siebzen in its prime, alongside a single line. "This is our history. Don't let it be erased." By sunset, the inn's phone rang nonstop. Offers of help, donations, volunteers. In the golden light spilling across the dining room, Adrienne caught Harper's eye. For the first time, she smiled at him without reservation. It wasn't a truce, but it was something worth building on. 2 nights later, the old maritime hall was filled beyond capacity. Wooden benches creaked under the weight of fishermen in salt-stained jackets, shop owners in rolled-up sleeves, and students with cameras ready. The scent of seawater clung to the air, mingling with the faint aroma of fresh-baked bread from the cafe across the street. Adrienne stood at the back, letting Harper take the lead at the podium. She didn't have notes, just the folded flyer with the inn's photo edges worn from being passed around town. "My grandmother used to bring me here every summer," Harper began. Her voice steady. She said, "A building is like a person. If you care for it, it will stand by you. If you abandon it, it will fade. Seebsen has stood by this town for over a century. I think it's time we stand by it." Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then rolling through the room like a tide. Calder sat near the front, legs crossed, expression polite but eyes sharp. When Harper finished, he rose with the ease of a man used to holding attention. "Progress isn't the enemy," he said smoothly. "I'm offering jobs, tourism, growth. Sentiment is admirable, but sentiment doesn't pay the bills." A fisherman in the second row stood, neither just tearing down the soul of this place. Murmurs of agreement filled the hall. Adrienne stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "We're not against growth, but growth without roots is collapse waiting to happen. Seebs can be both a thriving business and a living history." By the end of the night, a petition had gathered over 300 signatures. Volunteers offered labor, materials, even free advertising. As the crowd dispersed, Harper turned to Adrienne. "You were right about one thing. People will fight for what matters. But Calder's not backing off." Adrienne glanced toward the doorway where Calder stood, phone to his ear, gaze fixed on them. "Then neither are we." Outside, the harbor lights reflected on the black water, steady and unbroken, as if reminding them that some things endure, not by chance, but by choice. A week later, the scaffolding went up along the weathered facade of Seebsen. Sun glinted off fresh planks, the rhythmic sound of hammers mixing with the distant call of gulls. Volunteers arrived before dawn. Fishermen with tool belts, art students sketching window frames, retirees bringing coffee and biscuits for the crew. Harper stood at the edge of the porch, a clipboard in hand. She gave instructions with a mix of precision and warmth, the kind of tone that made people want to work harder. Adrienne watched from a few steps away, not as an investor, not as the man trying to fix the past, but as someone quietly proud. When Harper caught his gaze, she walked over, handing him a paintbrush. "You're on porch railings? 2 coats? No shortcuts?" He grinned. "Bossy, efficient," she corrected, then moved on to check the next team. By noon, the front wall had its first wash of pale seafoam green, the same color it wore a century ago. Henry Cross stopped by inspecting the structure, nodding in approval. If she keeps this pace, the grand reopening could be in 3 months. Arrived in the afternoon carrying a basket of lemonade. She stood for a moment watching Harper give instructions and said quietly to Adrienne, "You're in her life now. Not as a guest, not as a visitor. That's a different kind of responsibility." He didn't reply immediately. Instead, he dipped his brush back into the paint and said, "I know, and I'm staying." That evening, as the sun bled orange into the horizon, the 3 of them stood together on the unfinished porch. The air smelled of fresh wood and salt. Harper broke the silence. "When it's done, we're having a community dinner here, open to everyone." Adrienne looked at Ella, then back to Harper. "We better make it perfect." For the first time, Harper's smile toward him carried no caution, only recognition. It's not of a business partner or a stranger from her mother's past, but of someone who had finally shown up and stayed. 3 months later, the scent of fresh paint still lingered in the hallways of Seeb's Inn. Lanterns lined the wraparound porch, glowing like fireflies in the warm dusk. The ocean breeze carried laughter from the growing crowd. Neighbors, workers, old friends, everyone who had hammered a nail carried a plank, or brought coffee during long mornings of restoration. Harper stood near the entrance in a simple navy dress, greeting guests with the same warmth she had poured into every detail of the inn. The seafoam walls shone under the porch lights, the polished wood floors inside reflecting the soft golden glow of Edison bulbs overhead. Adrian arrived from the side gate, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled, a faint smear of paint still marking his wrist from a last-minute touch-up. He found Ella speaking with Henry, and for a moment he simply watched her, seeing not just the woman from his past, but the anchor of this entire journey. When the clock struck 7, Harper stepped onto the porch steps and raised her glass. The chatter faded. This place, she began, her voice steady, was nearly lost. Not just to weather or time, but to the idea that history doesn't matter if it doesn't make a profit. But history is made of people, of hands that built, voices that told stories, and hearts that believed something was worth saving. I didn't do this alone. We did it together. She turned toward Adrian, holding his gaze for a fraction longer than necessary. Some people arrive in your life when you least expect them, and sometimes they stay. The applause rose like a tide, warm and unrelenting. Adrian stepped forward, then joining her on the steps. He didn't take the glass from her hand. He simply placed his own hand over hers, steady and certain. As the first guests stepped inside, Harper led them to the restored dining room, where long tables overflowed with dishes from every volunteer's kitchen. The air was thick with the scent of roasted herbs, fresh bread and salt from the open windows. Children darted between chairs, their laughter mixing with the low hum of conversations. Later, when the night had thinned and the last guests wandered home under a quilt of starlight, Adrian, Ella, and Harper remained on the porch. The ocean whispered against the shore, a constant, patient sound. Harper leaned on the railing. "Tomorrow we start bookings." Adrian smiled. "And after that," she looked out at the dark water. "After that, we keep it alive. We make sure no one forgets what it took to get here." Issa placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You won't be doing it alone." And for the first time in decades, Adrian knew the promise wasn't just words. It was a foundation stronger than wood, older than history, built to last. The porch light swayed gently in the wind as the three of them stood together. A family not defined by the years they'd lost, but by the choice to be here now. Somewhere. In the distance, a buoy bell rang, and the night seemed to breathe in time with the waves. This time, he thought they wouldn't let it slip away. And that's how Sebzen found its way back to life, and how a family found its way back to each other. If you stayed with us until this very moment, thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and join us here every day for more powerful, heart-touching stories you won't want to miss.